H.R. 2844, a bill to amend the Communications Act of 1934 to consolidate the reporting obligations of the Federal Communications Commission in order to improve congressional oversight and reduce reporting burdens.
Pursuant to the rules, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. SCALISE, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. ESHOO, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials in the record on the bill.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The legislation before the House this afternoon, H.R. 2844, the FCC Consolidated Reporting Act, is a bipartisan bill that seeks to provide flexibility and relief to both our job creators as well as the Federal Communications Commission. This bill is another step in the process of streamlining government so that businesses can focus their time and resources on growing our economy and creating jobs instead of complying with outdated and burdensome mandates from the federal government. Every dollar spent on outdated FCC reporting mandates is a dollar that could otherwise be spent creating more high-paying jobs and investing in new infrastructure. H.R. 2844 also recognizes the reality that our nation is in a fiscal crisis and that we must find ways to do more with less. By consolidating 8 annual and triennial reports into a single biennial communications marketplace report, not only do we recognize this new budget reality by giving the FCC more flexibility and tools to drive greater efficiencies, but we can usher in a platform to analyze the converged nature of today's highly competitive intermodal communications industry, which has moved beyond the traditional confines of the 92 and 96 Cable and Communications Act. This simple common sense measure will also ensure that Congress has timely access to the Commission's best analysis of the communications landscape at the beginning of each Congress by requiring that the Communications Marketplace report be published in the last quarter of an even-numbered year. This will allow Congress better use findings to inform our legislative activities. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a great example of lawmakers from both sides of the aisle coming together to reform outdated government mandates that were created by Congresses of the past. I applaud Chairman Upton and Walden, as well as Ranking Member ESHOO, for working so closely and cooperatively with me on this legislation, and I strongly encourage my colleagues to join in supporting passage of this common sense measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that enough time be yielded to me that I may consume.
The gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 2844, a bill to streamline many of the outdated reporting requirements that Congress has placed on the Federal Communications Commission. At a time when agency resources are limited, this bill, I think, is an example of how to make the FCC's reporting obligations more efficient, which in turn will ensure that the agency can focus on its mission to protect the public interest and promote competition across the communications marketplace. The bill also ensures that the FCC has the flexibility to continue assessing the state of competition, which is so essential and so important in our country across the entire communications marketplace, including particular submarkets like wireless, cable, and satellite. This data is vital to both consumers and to policymakers. I want to thank Chairman Walden, certainly the chairman of the full committee, Chairman Upton, and most especially Representative Scalise for pursuing this legislation in a bipartisan manner and for working with me to ensure that the expert agency, the FCC, was included in our deliberations. Mr. Speaker, the House passed a similar bill in the last Congress. And so I recommend to all of our colleagues this very sensible bill that, again, is something that all members can stand for, and that is to streamline a federal agency, kind of get rid of some of the weeds of the past and clear a much a better path for the agency to continue, again, assessing the state of competition across the entire communications marketplace. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I don't believe I have any speakers on this side. I urge my colleagues, everyone in the House, to support the bill. I think it deserves that kind of support, and I will yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentlelady from California again for her hard work on this and the good bipartisan cooperation that we've had in making these reforms. And at this time, I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the chairman of the Telecommunications Subcommittee, the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Walden.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon.
And I thank the chair, and I thank the gentleman from Louisiana and the gentlelady from California for their great work on this, I think, really good bill. This is the kind of thing, I was in small business for more than 22 years with my wife, and these are the sorts of odds and ends that can eat a small business alive, and it can eat an agency alive as well. These silly mandates that get put on, often for a good reason initially, but then nobody ever goes back and says, why are we still asking for, a report on the status of the telegraph industry or whatever else? We went back and did that. This is the kind of nuts and bolts work that I think helps clean up government, helps make it more efficient, make it more productive, make it more affordable, and get it out of the way, and help to get it to stop doing things it doesn't need to do. And too often, we don't do that. And I think one of the hallmarks of our subcommittee has been a real bipartisan effort to make sure that programs that we create, we then follow and make sure they're working, like we're doing with FirstNet and the incentive auctions to try and track and make sure it's working, and then to dig even deeper and look for those things that aren't working or that are outdated, but yet put a burden on an agency and cost either those who pay for that agency through their taxes or through fees or whatever. It's all coming out of the private economy into the government economy. We need to stop that. And so this bill consolidates 8 separate congressionally mandated reports on the communications industry into a single comprehensive report. As my colleague from Louisiana said, it changes the timeline so that the Congress can get the information in a better and timely manner, and it cuts costs. So I hope this bill will receive strong bipartisan support in the House. I assume it will. And I hope that our friends across the building will this Congress take it up and pass it as well. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the bipartisan work of my friend from California and from Louisiana. I urge the House to approve this measure and send it expeditiously over to the Senate, and I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In closing, as we hear from our constituents as we just got back from this August work period where many of us held town hall meetings throughout our district, people are frustrated. Why can't Congress work together to get things done? And I think this is a good example of how both parties came together and looked at some very outdated laws. People also ask, why are you always passing laws, and why don't you actually go and get rid of some of the laws that are on the books that don't make any sense? Well, that's what we're doing here with H.R. 2844. We're actually going through and repealing laws that are burdens to our small businesses who are out there trying to create jobs in the technology industry. One of the great growing segments of our economy is the telecommunications industry. And yet you'll look at some of these reports that they're required to go and mandated to go and compile, many which have no real bearing on the marketplace today. And then, of course, as the chairman of the subcommittee mentioned, we actually do repeal the telegraph report. Why we still have a law in the books that requires a report be issued on competitiveness in the telegraph industry. It goes to show you how you have so many of these outdated laws on the books still to this day, and Congress needs to, from time to time, go through and repeal outdated rules and regulations like this. That's what we're doing in this legislation. It's a good common sense piece of legislation that we worked in a bipartisan way to bring to the floor. I urge all my colleagues to pass the legislation, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2844 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider. The gentleman is recognized.
I'd like to request the yeas and nays on this bill.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and the nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.
On this vote, the yeas are 415, the nays are 0. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.